In a world where news often feels heavy with tragedy, division, and despair, every now and then, a single act of bravery reminds us of the humanity we still share. This is the story of an ordinary man, 60 years old, with no fame, no uniform, no spotlight, who stepped forward when it mattered most, saving a life with nothing more than courage, determination, and the knowledge of CPR. But the story didn't end there. A courtroom, a judge named Frank, and an emotional response so raw, so human, turned this act into a viral moment that touched millions across the globe. Tonight, we go beyond the headlines. We'll discover who this man was, relive the moment of crisis, and witness how a judge's tears turned a local rescue into an international movement of compassion. This is not just about CPR. This is about courage, about the ripple effects of a single decision, and about how one man's hands reminded the world of the strength of the human heart. Michael was 60 years old, a retired auto mechanic from a modest Midwestern town. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't powerful, he wasn't even particularly social. What he was steady. For years, Michael had lived in the same quiet neighborhood, known to neighbors as the man who could fix anything with an engine. If your lawn mower wouldn't start, if your truck broke down, if your generator failed in the dead of winter, you called Mike. But behind that steady presence was a life of both joy and loss. He had married his high school sweetheart, Linda, and built a life filled with love, laughter, and small-town traditions. They raised a daughter, Sarah, who went on to become a teacher. 10 years before the rescue that would make him famous, tragedy struck. Linda passed away after a battle with cancer. Michael's world grew quieter after that. He spent his time in his garage, repairing cars, helping neighbors, fishing on Sundays, and being a grandfather to Sarah's 2 children. And there was one other detail about Michael, one that would later mean everything. Decades ago, while working at a manufacturing plant, he had been required to take a CPR training course. At the time, he'd thought little of it. Just another box checked, another workplace requirement. He never dreamed that those lessons would stay buried in his memory, waiting for the day he would need them. October 14th, a crisp autumn morning. The trees were beginning to turn, their leaves painting the town in shades of red and gold. Michael had gone into town to pick up groceries. Nothing unusual, nothing remarkable. He carried a canvas bag with apples, bread, and coffee, the little comforts of daily life. But as he walked past the county courthouse, something unexpected happened. A man in his early 40s suddenly collapsed on the courthouse steps. Witnesses later described it as sudden and terrifying. One moment, the man was climbing the stairs, and the next, he was clutching his chest and falling hard onto the stone steps. People screamed, some froze, others pulled out their phones. A woman shouted for help, her voice trembling with panic. And in that moment, Michael Turner made a choice. He dropped his groceries, the apples spilling across the sidewalk, and pushed through the crowd. He knelt beside the stranger, his mechanic's hands steady as he checked for breathing, for a pulse. Nothing. The man's heart had stopped. For many bystanders, time felt frozen. But for Michael, it became crystal clear. He remembered the training, the compressions, the breaths. He knew the window of time was short, minutes at most. So he began. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths. The crowd fell silent, watching as this 60-year-old grandfather fought desperately against death itself. CPR is not gentle, it is not clean, it is not easy. It is a battle, a fight against time, against fate, against the silence of a stopped heart. Michael's arms ached as he pressed down again and again. Sweat formed on his brow despite the autumn chill. His breathing was heavy, but his determination did not waver. "Come on, breathe, come back," he muttered under his breath, as though willing the man's soul to return. Minutes felt like hours. A woman sobbed nearby. A young man whispered prayers under his breath. And then it happened. A gasp, a sharp, ragged inhale as air rushed back into the man's lungs. His chest rose, weak but alive. The crowd erupted. Some cried, others shouted in relief. One man clutched his head in disbelief. The ambulance arrived moments later, paramedics rushing to stabilize the patient. They confirmed what everyone had just witnessed. Michael Turner, a 60-year-old retiree, had pulled a man back from the brink of death. The stranger's life had been saved. The man Michael saved was David Miller, a local father of two who had been on his way into the courthouse for a hearing. Without Michael's intervention, doctors later said, David would not have survived. In the days that followed, the story spread quickly through town. The local paper ran the headline, "Mechanic saves man's life outside courthouse." Neighbors knocked on Michael's door to thank him. Social media posts began to circulate. But what no one expected was what happened next. 2 weeks later, during a routine session at the courthouse, Judge Frank Caprio, a man already beloved online for his compassionate rulings and viral moments of kindness, addressed the incident. He didn't have to. It wasn't part of a case before him. But the story had reached his chambers and it had moved him deeply. That day cameras were rolling, and what Judge Frank said would soon reach millions. Standing in his courtroom, robe draped over his shoulders, Judge Frank spoke not as a judge, but as a human being. He began by recounting Michael's actions, the courage of stepping forward when others froze, the strength to keep going when it seemed hopeless. And then his voice broke. With tears welling in his eyes, Judge Frank looked directly into the camera and said, "Michael Turner may not wear a uniform. He may not stand on a stage or seek recognition. But to the man whose life he saved, and to all of us who believe in the power of humanity, he is a hero. In a world where too often we focus on what divides us, let this remind us of what connects us: compassion, courage, and love for one another." He paused, visibly moved, before adding softly, "Michael, if you're watching this, thank you. You reminded us of what it means to be human." The courtroom was silent. Some of those present wiped their eyes. The clip would later be uploaded online, and within days it would spread across the world. At first, it was just another courtroom clip, shared by a local TV station. But within hours, the views began to climb. 50,000, 200,000, 1 million. On TikTok, the clip of Judge Frank's emotional tribute exploded. Stitched into videos of CPR demonstrations, motivational speeches, and even reaction clips of people crying as they watched. On YouTube, it trended under Most Inspiring Moments of the Year. On Facebook, families shared it with captions like, "This is what real heroes look like." Michael Turner's name became known far beyond his small town, and though he was uncomfortable with the attention, he was also deeply humbled. As he told a local reporter later, "I just did what anyone should do. If you can help someone, you help, that's all." But to millions, it was more than that. It was a symbol proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. The impact of the moment went beyond likes and shares. Across the country, and even internationally, CPR training centers reported a surge in signups. In schools, teachers replayed the clip to remind students of the importance of learning first aid. In workplaces, managers scheduled emergency training sessions. One woman in New York posted, "I saw Michael's story and signed up for a CPR class today. If a 60-year-old man can save a life, so can I." Another comment read, "Judge Frank cried and so did I. Humanity is not lost. Thank you, Michael." Michael himself received letters, hundreds of them, from strangers thanking him, sharing stories of how CPR had saved their loved ones, or confessing that his courage had inspired them to step forward in their own lives. What had begun as one man saving another became something larger, a movement of compassion. In the months that followed, Michael continued to live his quiet life. He fixed cars. He took his grandchildren fishing. He attended church on Sundays. But something had changed. He was now known as the man who saved a life outside the courthouse. People would stop him in the grocery store to shake his hand. Children pointed him out to their parents. Judge Frank himself invited Michael to his courtroom, where he honored him publicly. Standing before the judge, Michael seemed almost embarrassed, shifting from foot to foot as applause filled the room. Judge Frank placed a hand over his heart and said, "We live in difficult times, but Michael, you remind us that the best of humanity is still alive. You are proof that heroes walk among us quietly, humbly, until the moment they are needed most." The audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. Michael never sought recognition, but in that moment, he represented something bigger than himself. He was a symbol of the courage that lives inside ordinary people everywhere. In the end, this story isn't just about Michael Turner. It isn't just about Judge Frank or even about CPR. It's about the reminder that in our darkest moments, in the seconds that matter most, ordinary people have the power to do extraordinary things. Michael's hand saved a life. Judge Frank's words touched millions, and together they created a story of compassion that continues to inspire. So the next time you wonder if kindness still exists in the world, remember Michael Turner, remember Judge Frank, and remember that sometimes the smallest choices to act, to help, to speak with compassion can ripple outward in ways we may never fully understand. This is the story of a hero, a judge, and the viral moment that reminded us all of what it means to be human.